My name is Matt Mason. I was born and raised in Nebraska, then moved away, went to college at Santa Clara University, then came back, lived here in Des Moines, then went back to California for University of California, Davis for a master's degree, and then ended up back here and been back here for a little over 10 years now. I guess I ended up in California for college, just kind of on luck. I've kind of figured I was going to end up going to Creighton, and then got the chance to go to University of California, or not, no, that was graduate school, but Santa Clara University. And having grown up in Omaha, lived in Nebraska my whole life, I really wanted to see somewhere else. So ended up going out there. And then as far as graduate school at Davis, I think California schools just like me more, because that was the best program that accepted me. So I ended up back out there, and it was a great program. I really enjoyed my time there. Yeah, but then California's kind of crowded. It's a beautiful place. I love visiting, but living there was a little crazy. So I love being back in Nebraska. I think Nebraska in the Plains has a big influence on how I write. I think a lot of my writing, I don't know where it's going from when I start with the idea or a quote or an image or something, but I don't exactly know where it's going until it's there. And I think, the subconscious mind has a big part in people's writing. For me, it's a huge part, and whatever's around me really affects it. And with Nebraska, pick up the new Backwaters anthology, Nebraska Presence. You'll see a diversity of voices, but there's a certain kind of style that runs through a whole lot of people. There's a very conversational, a very just kind of good and straightforward way of writing that not everybody, but a lot of Nebraskans write with, and I really like that. There's been a lot. I can't really name everybody who's influenced me. There's, one of the big influences for me was just when I was an undergraduate in college. I had a teacher named Ed Ingebretson who really turned me on to poetry. He was kind of like a teacher out of Dead Poets Society, just really amazing. And then after I left college, I was writing a lot, but I didn't really know how to define what I was writing, because it seemed different than poetry you find, in the bookstores. I was done with college, so I wanted to keep writing and keep in touch with poetry. So I would go to a bookstore, pick up, oh, this book won the National Book Award. It must be a great book of poetry. And then I'd read it, and I would be completely uninterested in it. And I'm thinking, well, am I completely uninterested in poetry, or what am I writing? And then I was living in Des Moines, and they had a great yearly poetry program. And the first year they did it, one of the readers was Galway Cannell. And, he's won a Pulitzer Prize. He's, state poet of, I think, Vermont. And so I figured, well, maybe I'll like him, probably not. And went, and he read a lot of poems that I really liked. And then the most noteworthy was a poem of his called Oatmeal, which was about the dangers of eating oatmeal alone, and had all these like Keats jokes, and it was intelligent and funny and bizarre, and it was the first time I'd run across a major poet reading a poem that I really wish I'd written. It made me just kind of like, oh my God, open my eyes to it. And like from right there, I wrote, right after that reading, in the next month or two, I wrote all the poems that I used on my graduate school transcripts and all to get into graduate school. And it just kind of really started things off for me. And then I had a lot of great teachers in graduate school, a lot of great influences now, like Denise Duhamel is a writer in Florida, Bill Clefcorn, our state poet's fantastic, and of course, Ted Kooser, who's reading here later this year. The romantic poets, I could list poets for the next 20 minutes easily. So a lot of great folks who really, yeah. Well, I started writing in high school, even though I really didn't think I liked poetry. But it did something for me to try to write. And as far as saying when I knew I was a writer, I think I'm still kind of figuring that out. I've been lucky. A lot of people like what I write, and I feel fortunate to have opportunities to read at the Jane Poe-Geske room and all, and a lot of other wonderful things that are very flattering. But I still kind of I feel like the people I've read are the writers, and I'm still learning. So whether I was being published, whether people were asking me to do readings, whether anybody wanted me to talk to anybody ever about writing, even if none of this was happening, I would still be writing, because writing is something that for me is important. It's a great release. It's on one level it helps me kind of figure out my own what's going on in my life. I kind of have a certain disconnect between my head and my heart that I can't just sit and figure out. But when I'm writing, everything in that comes out. Whether I'm writing about something like that or not, what's going on in my life comes out in the poem somewhere. And so writing for me has become very, very important. And it's a great creative outlet. And again, I've been very fortunate just to have been recognized here and there for a few things. So I feel very lucky with that. A lot inspires me to write. I guess when I first started writing, I would write whenever inspiration kind of the clouds would open up and the inspiration would come and kick me in the head. And sometimes that meant I didn't write very much. So after my senior year in college, I had a class where we had to write one poem a week. And I remember going into that class and seeing the syllabus and going, I can't write a poem a week for 10 weeks. It turns out I can. I can't write a great poem a week. I can't write a good poem a week, but I can write a poem a week. And if you're looking for poems, you'll find them. There's poems in what people say to you. If you have a deadline and you're serious about it, there's inspiration everywhere. Right now, the biggest inspiration for me is I have a 3.5-year-old daughter. So she pops up here and there in the poems. Yeah. My daughter's a big theme. I've been working on kind of a small series of poems on the Romantic poets. I have a manuscript I've been working on for about 10 years of Old Testament poems. I've got a lot of different. I have one chapbook that was published a few years ago that's all purposefully bad translations of Neruda, which was a lot of fun to work on. And one of my stranger works, I had a couple chapbooks of poems about cows.
Yeah. They can categorize this too.
Yeah, I kind of, I get on streaks and go for a while a lot of the time. So I'd like to be able to say that, like Ted Kooser, I get up at 4 a.m. and write for a few hours, but that's not true. I used to be a person who could write. Most of my writing was done after midnight, between midnight 2 a.m. That's kind of a great time for me. But now I'm a father. So I pretty much write whenever I have the opportunity. Like yesterday, I was in Wahoo High School and doing conferences with students on poetry and poetry presentation. And in between students, I was scribbling out a poem and working on it all day. So wherever you can find the time and the idea works out, yeah. I think to a large extent I do kind of have a style. I write a lot either in or very close to my speaking voice. As I speak, I don't, I go fast, I go slow, I don't have any steady rhythms, and that's how my poems kind of come out too. Though sometimes it's a little different, like the project I did a few years ago, mistranslating Neruda, is completely different. Absolutely different voice, absolutely different style. I do have kind of a style that I go to normally, but I like playing with different things, working more in form and things every now and then, and just keeping myself from doing the same thing over and over, basically. The audience I write for is pretty much whoever I'm around at that point in my life, I think. Right now, I think I write a lot for my wife. I write a lot for myself, too, I guess, It's a fact of what are the kinds of poems I want to hear. Well, I'll try to write that. But it's the people around me who really influence me. There are times when I'm going to a lot of open mics and poetry readings, and I'll write for that kind of crowd. There are times when I'm around certain poets or just co-workers, and I'll write things kind of for them. So it just depends what I'm doing at that point in my life, I guess. If someone wants to write, I'll suggest, first of all, they write a lot, and they read a lot. I think all of how to become a better writer is summed up in those two easy steps. But of course, teachers find longer ways to say that. And I guess I'm a teacher now, since I'm teaching a class at UNO starting tomorrow. So I'll go into it a little bit more in depth, I guess. But yeah, I think the main thing is just encourage. When I started writing, I didn't know what I was writing. There was a lot that was like poems that I knew as poems, and there was a lot that seemed different. And you write in whatever way it comes out, and maybe that ends up coming out in song or short story, or not even in words, in painting or sculpture or something. But I think everybody has got something in them, and it's find the way to let it out. I think poetry's a great one for most people, though, just because it's such a way of kind of packing your emotions or figuring out your own emotions, and it's not just helpful, but it's fun and exciting and interesting. So, there's a lot I want to do as a writer. I've got 2 book manuscripts I'm working on. I want to go out more and be able to see poets I really admire. I love when I'm able to do that. I want, win a Pulitzer Prize or 2, or some small things really. I've won the Nebraska Book Award. I can cross that off the list, and just have to get the Pulitzer, appear on Fresh Air with Terry Gross on NPR, and maybe Garrison Keillor, maybe. Yeah, that'd be all right. Nah, there's a lot of things that are just fun and exciting. I'm just kind of enjoying having the opportunities like today to be able to come out and read and meet some great people that come to the crowd, in the crowds and in the audience. So I love doing what I'm doing. Yeah, I'm mostly going to read from my book, Things We Don't Know, We Don't Know, and a few newer poems, but mostly from the book. It just won the Nebraska Book Award, so I've been reading from it a lot more lately, which is fun. So.
Good evening. I'm glad you came out on a cold. I have to note that it's a cold evening. I don't always like to say exactly what day it is, because we're going to show these on TV later. But anyway, it is kind of a cold, snowy evening in January here, and it's good that you braved the conditions and came out. I'm Meredith McGowan. I'm the curator of the Heritage Room, and I'd like to welcome you to the Heritage Room and to the John H. Ames Reading Series. The John H. Ames Reading Series has been around for more than 20 years, and in fact, this reading is the 173rd. So there you are, kind of a nondescript number, but nevertheless, it's a great one for you. I just wanted to remind you that the folks from 5 City TV do film all of the Ames reading programs, and they have a broadcast schedule if you look on the city website, if you want to know when they're going to show the programs. They also give us copies to check out, and so we have 20 years of Ames programs. Used to be on video, and of course now they're DVDs. So, and in fact, I did have a DVD that I was going to wave around. This is the one from September when Paul Johnsgaard and Twyla Hansen came to read from their book that they did for Spring Creek Prairie Audubon Center. So there's that. We're in the Jane Pope Geske Heritage Room, and it is a special representative collection of Nebraska author works. We're trying to preserve and promote Nebraska authors. We have about 13,000 volumes over here now and about 3,000 authors. So that's kind of cool. We also invite you to come back when we're open, kind of limited hours, but we're open Tuesday through Friday, 12 to 3, and Sunday afternoons from 2 to 5. So you might want to come back and look at some of the artwork that's around, look at some of the materials that we have in the room too. I'd also like to thank the Nebraska Literary Heritage Association because we're able to bring programs like these to you because of an endowment that was established through their volunteer efforts. Tonight, our reader is Matt Mason. And it appears in the information that Matt gave to me that he's kind of moved in and out of Nebraska over the years. And I think mostly he ended up in California to go to school. And he did an interview earlier, and he explains why he ended up in California. So you'll have to listen to the program later to find out all that information. He also seems to be kind of a busy guy. And this is in quotes, he's currently a teacher, an audio guy on a video photography crew, excuse me, a DVD consultant, an actor in a transmission commercial, and he lives in Omaha, so I guess maybe you have to go to Omaha to see the transmission commercial, I don't know, and a poetry performer. And we were glad that we could have him here this evening because he does have a lot of things going on there, I think. And he's got a family, too. He's also found time to publish several books and to win several awards, including the 2007 Nebraska Book Award for Poetry, which he won for this book, Things We Don't Know, We Don't Know, which I think we're going to hear quite a bit about this evening later. And he also won the 2006 Nebraska Book Award for the Best Anthology, which is the Slam-a-Lama Ding Dong, an anthology of Nebraska slam poets, which is in the back of the room. Anyway, I think maybe we'll find out a little bit more about Matt's poetry and maybe a little bit about slam poetry too, I don't know. Perhaps he'll tell us that. We're glad to have Matt here this evening. If you could help me welcome him, I'd appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be able to read here in the Jane Pope Geske room. I've been running the website at poetrymenu.com, and which lists Nebraska poetry readings, and seeing like, oh my God, I want to go to that reading. Oh my God, I want to go to that reading, and they're all in this room. So it's nice to be here to read. I'm going to start with a poem that doesn't have a name yet. It's pretty much brand new. Ted Kooser, former U.S. Poet Laureate, would wake up at 4 to write before going to his insurance job. It's 4:49. I've been watching this piece of paper for a while now. Ted won a Pulitzer. I have thought about words like possum, sarcophagus, Gorbachev, none of which have done more than curl up and moan. The world so dark and hushed hangs above our heads, waiting to break like cold eggs, the sky black as cast iron. Ted will go to work soon. I am waiting to start. And then I'm going to read some poems. This book came out just last year from the Backwaters Press. And I'm very, happy with how the book came out. It's kind of, I've published a lot of chapbooks in the past. It's nice to see, no staples. Nothing wrong with staples. They're perfectly functional, but it kind of makes me happy to have a, Pinocchio's become a real boy or something like that. So this poem in here, this is the first poem I ever had published. It's called Ode to Marlin Perkins. And I wrote this in California where I was going to undergrad at Santa Clara University. So this is all based on true events. I remember sitting in the cold Hawaiian hotel room, watching as a plastic anchor man labeled the world's troubles and dropped them in my lap. And at the top of this pile lay Marlin Perkins, dead at 71. When people learn where I'm from, they smugly ask, "How is Marlin Perkins?" And I tell them he's dead. In their embarrassment, they whisper, "I'm sorry, I didn't know." His polar bear hair and calm control in the clutch of anacondas made him more than mortal in his Sunday evening searches to capture pygmy antelope, cage Bulgarian battle rabbits, catch northern snow gators, and completely captivate me until the last Alaskan lemur was tranquilized. As I drive past the temple-like structure standing amongst the gargantuan hills of steel and stone in darkest Omaha, I see the proud Indian head like an icon carved into a mountainside and wonder if Marlin's soul rests there. How can it be I now find his undead image smiling like a lion in my living room? He's rounding up rabid kangaroos and isn't gone, for the gods of syndication and his assistant Jim have brought him back to me. Marlin is wrestled free from the suckered tentacle of death, and I pray to him. That's one thing in California everybody did, actually. Oh, you're from where? Omaha. Do you know Marlin Perkins? No, I don't. I really don't. All right, and this is this poem I like. It's a few years old, so some of the landscape has changed, but it's one of my favorites. It's called "The Thin Line of What I Know." Iowa flows across the windshield like a relaxation video. I turn off the radio and listen to wind rattle the window near my cheek. Gravel scattered after the last ice popping in the wheel wells. I daydream about being in Des Moines already with you. The familiar mile markers pass like handholds up a cliff. Number 31 and 680 becomes I-80. 66, I'm halfway to Des Moines. 88, 2/3. 99, 3/4. 121, 11/12. At number 60, the Purple Martin train lounges, a primped wreck zigzagging and only a little purple. On one trip, I stopped and bought an "It's Purple Martin Time" button at the caboose-made museum. I only stopped there once. Like I only had one flat sandwich at Four Sons, only made one trip up the stairs of the observation tower near the Beebeetown exit, one look from above at the little crease of interstate, the thin line of what I know, among all the foreign fields and hills stretching from it like butterfly wings. I always mean to follow some of the signs, detour through some place like Persia, Casey, Atlantic, Van Meter, Waukee, Prairie Rose State Park. All just tin signs and exits to me. I never go further off the interstate than the Have a Nice Day water tower smiling from Adair. Never go past the gas stations. Never put my fingers to the skin of the east or west Nishnabotna rivers. Never slow at mile 71 where that pond, always flat and still no matter how windy, stretches two drowning elms like bony arms clinging onto the sky. As the counties slowly metamorphose from Potawatomi to Polk, I watch the trees along the road perform all their acts. Fat, naked, flowering, flaming, green, chainsawed. I know the corn by name, fast motion life flowing from conception by John Deere's through green puberty, then fading, then death at the teeth of their own creators. The bodies removed, their ground left for crows and cows to tidy and fertilize. More of you forms as the white on green numbers count upward. At 14, I see your feet. At 23, you have hands, a hazy middle, lips. By 57 or 58, you are female. 85, your eyes are gray like the sky. 96, the cornfields fade into your hair. I know every mile ticking by. I know, can drive by sense of touch. And putting together this book was a lot of fun too, because I chose just a lot of the poems that I'd had published in magazines, but also tried to get some kind of story from start to finish. And it ends up being a love story, though it's kind of hard to tell that as it kind of rolls through a lot of ex-girlfriend poems. But then the last poems in the book are all for my wife. So it's kind of like a whole formation of a somewhat stupid person. Not entirely, though. Of course, it goes in some odd directions. Like this is hard to justify in a love story, but I think it is. So this is called Night in the Shenandoah River Valley. The sun yawns low and red over the valley where Stonewall Jackson didn't care that he was outnumbered by a sea of damp blue uniforms. After the sun gave way to coal smoke black, Stonewall Jackson must have lain in his tent wondering what surrounded him. What birds or bugs out there make that droning song, washing in and out till dawn. And the next morning, did he dress sharp as a saber and stand on the Blue Ridge like a tourist, thinking about bringing his family here, having a picnic, before getting back to the business of making valleys bleed? Trees have come and gone since then, and farms and homesteads, too many wildflowers to count, though the effort wouldn't be a waste. And I lie here listening, wondering how many weary dreams have lain themselves to sleep in this same place. And this is, well, I guess it's self-explanatory. I don't need to explain it, but it's called The News About Poets. Gregory Corso got such rave reviews. Not his latest book, I'm talking other news. He spent 50 years writing, but it's the one day dead that got his fame in all the papers, that gets his name read. Because poets don't make the covers of Entertainment Weekly. They make page 16. They make obituaries. So you won't see William Clefcorn in a book review section unless he writes a review of a Jackie Collins collection. As they teach the same rules at all the journalism schools, don't mention a book of poems till they pull the body from a pool. They'll write, that touchdown was poetry, or Travolta was poetic, but the writers never rock out to a Billy Collins lyric. See, Sylvia and Dylan knew how to get some coverage, drink yourself to death, or stick your head in an oven. Berryman, Jarrell, Sexton, and Crane knew the final step on their walks of fame wouldn't be box office bonanzas or talk show popularity. The way a poet makes people is posthumously. So let the latest network idols, athletes, and musicians flash their retouched teeth across the grocery line editions. Don't worry who's dating Britney or dragging Oprah through the mud. If you choose to write poems, you choose to write with blood. Because poets don't make the covers of Entertainment Weekly. They make page 16. They make obituaries. It's my happy poem for everyone. Anytime, Rex. Not that writing poetry is bad, but it just is interesting how much, society talks, if something's great, it's poetic and all. And then they don't go to a library and read a book of poetry. What can I do, though? All right. This poem is called Midnight Train to Omaha. I left God in a closet back in Denver. But like a good son, I miss Mom more. I suppose, though, she'll eventually have sheets to put away, and she'll open the closet door, not noticing him at first, then gasping when she finally recognizes him folded over a hanger. She'll say quickly she has a careless son who just forgot him and she'd better roll him up and mail him, but she'll know better, really. She'll take him upstairs and make him some soup. Not mention anything directly, but ask my sister to pry a little. Do I hang out in atheist bars now? Is it something John Paul said? When I call, will I ask about him? Will I ever want to talk to him? Did he always eat this much and use so many towels? And for those Catholic high schools, I'm coming too soon. It was just a phase. No. I actually am fairly religious, but we've all had a few times. So, this poem, though, this is called Science and Love. I wrote this after I'd read an article in Newsweek about how when we feel like we're in love, that often just has something to do with how something or someone smells, which I thought was kind of an interesting concept. So, science and love. Maybe the scientists are right. Maybe it's just chemical, just pheromones, light refraction, DNA, tactile impact, circumstantial sense, releasing the balloons and banners in our blood, the trumpets in our heartbeat, the cheering throng of every pore and follicle. I can see it, as I've tried to be in love before with precise women. Faces and attitudes ripe for sonnets. All I could ask for if I were to write out my wishes to Santa or Cupid or whoever manufactures these things. Though now, I suppose it could be science. Could be Microsoft or Dow or U.S. Steel or Beatrice. Maybe my fascination with Little Debbie isn't so absurd. Maybe that factory can box me some love as long as they get the scent correct. I only say this because I am in love, and not with anyone like the description on my Christmas list. I mean, she's an English major. She's blonde. She loves Brussels sprouts, doesn't have a car, still lives with her parents. She must just smell okay. And blonde people are okay too, I should mention. That'd make sense. There must be an algebraic equation to graph how the gray of her eyes can make me lose whole sentences already set in motion. A chart surely shows how a precise tilt of her head and vocal inflection can make me need to touch the skin curving over her shoulder. And when my lips parabola up at her voice on the phone, it's pitch and timbre playing my lizard brain like an accordion and my stomach sack of nerves like a dulcimer. Hippocrates, you old bearded Greek, how does it feel to be so close to Venus? Einstein, Hawking, Oppenheimer. You could have been Garbo and Marilyn combined if you looked to these little endocrines instead. But no matter. I'm seeing her tonight, and all I need to know is up my nose, where there are candelabra and fireplaces waiting for her to come close and ignite. Somebody almost clapped. Yay. And then this poem is just called Her. I can't fall asleep at night with her in my head. No, it's not fantastic, pornographic, or even romantic, just her name. Just the shadows draping off of her, as if she sat across the room near the edge of that moonlight whisper. I don't really even picture her, as if I can't look at her directly, as if I'm too polite or shy to, but she has a cathedral in her name bulging from my blind spot. You see, I could read by her. She conducts through my wiring, she saturates the air like radio signals, exists as neither particle nor wave. She is the gravity that ties me to this world and the tide that pulls me away. I could breathe only her. This is a poem of mine. It was included in the anthology Nebraska Presents, which Backwaters Press just put out. Is also in an anthology called Spoken Word Revolution Redux, or Redo, depending how bold you feel in pronouncing the title, I guess. But this is called The Good News. It was written as my sister and I were driving back from Denver. And we spent about 100 miles behind a minivan that had a bumper sticker that said, "Tell the good news about Jesus." So for about 100 miles, I'm looking at it going, what would I say? And kind of decided that I wouldn't be too different from the people in the minivan. I would probably just use different words and examples, I suppose. So this is my stab at the good news. Jesus lent me $10 when I forgot my wallet at lunch. Sure, he could have ordered a chicken pesto sandwich and broke it into 2 full meals, but he's no show-off. That's what I like about Jesus. Jesus listens to cool music. If it weren't for Jesus, I never would have known about Tom Waits or Ani DeFranco, and I sure wouldn't own any Lyle Lovett CDs. But Jesus makes a kick-ass mixtape. Jesus loves cows, tells me my poems with cows in them are a hoot, and encourages me to look out at a green field full of white cows and imagine salvation is underneath each windmill. Jesus saves and Jesus recycles. Jesus tells me that Pat Robertson is right. And so is Al Sharpton. That they're both wrong too, but that's not his point. His point is how God is sewn into every fabric, even yourselves, even Elvis. Jesus eats fish for more than omega-3 fatty acids, drinks red wine for more reasons than his sacred heart. Jesus doesn't dress like the medieval paintings with the gold hats and the Mr. T rosaries. Sure, he can clean up nice, but Jesus likes blue jeans. Jesus pisses me off with his honesty sometimes, but it's not like he's ever wrong. And Jesus acts real serious when someone rushes up to him hollering, "Jesus, I will see you up in heaven. I will be there waiting to look at you." Jesus says they should get their kumbayayas off by putting on some overalls and hammering in the morning. May as well make heaven bigger, not just your egos. Jesus actually digs the "how does Jesus eat M&Ms" joke. He won't do it at a party, but he did do it once when just the 2 of us were watching cartoons. When he found out I was coming out to Lincoln tonight, Jesus wanted me to tell all of you he loves you. He also wanted me to ask you to please stop doing that thing. Jesus tells me that I'm saved, and then he laughs real loud. I hate it when Jesus does that. This poem is essentially the title poem of the collection. I read it a little bit different than it is on the page. Poem's called Code Orange. It's not always a little boy who cries wolf. Sometimes the wolf cries wolf and points away. We now go live to a press conference with the White House press secretary. Ms. Secretary, Americans seem confused about where this war on terror is going. At a press conference a while back to explain the war on terror, former Defense Secretary Rumsfeld was quoted as saying, "There are known knowns. These are things we know that we know. But there are also known unknowns. That is to say, there are things we know we don't know. But there are also unknown unknowns. Things we don't know we don't know." Can you explain this kind of explanation for us? Duct tape your doors shut, we were on Code Orange. Code Orange people, blue skies no matter, there is anthrax somewhere. Somebody said something about smallpox. Wherever. An unnamed man reportedly said something big was coming down. eventually. A man said people are going to die. People are going to die. Americans are going to die. Officials are quoted as saying things. Officials are quoted as saying, hurry, hurry, run. Seal yourself in a Ziploc bag, in a lead-walled box, in a hole in the earth, in prayer to our God, because sources suggest it could be any day, hour, minute, second. Duck could be any metropolis, city, small town, farmstead, or possibly somewhere else. For God's sake, people, there are experts telling us we're not safe. We're not safe. Now do what we say, and nobody gets hurt. There's fear out past your walls. There's fear itself blowing against the plastic sheeting and the bars of gray tape. There is so much to fear. We have to fight them, kill them, cripple them for Jesus. Amen. It's not always a little boy who cries wolf. Sometimes the wolf cries wolf. And it's not always the wolf our little boys are sent out to kill. And then, somewhere after the politics and the Civil War references and other things, we finally do get to the part of the book where my wife shows up. And I should note that a lot of... I've been writing for a fair amount of time, and actually after I got my master's degree, I ran into what are called poetry slams, which was mentioned in my intro. And I should mention, poetry slams are not me up, like I would not be on stage with Donald Rumsfeld as we both try to make fun of each other. Poetry slam is just a sports term by the guy who started it about 21 years ago in a bar in Chicago. Guy was running an open mic that wasn't going well, so he took 5 people out of the audience and said, "You 5 are judges." It made the poets, raise their voices occasionally and maybe shake their fists or something. But I think it's been a good thing for audiences, and I think a fun thing for a lot of poets too. So. And with that, go to a more sedate poem. It's called "In Spring I Fall in Love with Redbud Trees." In spring I fall in love with redbud trees, take the city off like a jacket, and walk into the hawthorns and hickories, red oaks and black walnuts showing here in a brown and white movie. Except for a mist of new color on them. I'll call this green, though it's so much brighter, moving in a fog across the ground, in the air, in the voices of birds returning, in the swelling of temperatures to come. The tree trunks blur into branches and river bluffs, watch each other's distinctions away, though the police siren and the jet engine and the interstate hum from out there call ahem, ahem, to any reverie that may be budding. In spring, I walk through warm green breath, past shagbark and basswood, past saplings and towers, to the whisperers, the stubble growing out in shades of lavender. In shy gasps of color I come here for, that I've watched every face around me for, closed my eyes and inhaled for, waiting to know the touch of this, which, in spring, I fall in love with, and spend the rest of the season searching for the home these colors commute from, the street, the apartment number, the door. And this is an untitled poem for Sarah. It's for my wife, Sarah Mason, or Sarah McKinstry Brown, who's awesome but can't be here tonight because she's putting a 3.5-year-old to sleep right about now. Every morning you'd think all the moths would throw themselves into the sun, but they wait for streetlights to consume them in small coughs of sparkle. My dear, my dear, my dear, I have stopped listening to my moth soul. My dear, I am done tilting at streetlights. My paper wings soar. Brush your paper heart. Oh. My paper wings soar, brush your blazing heart. That makes a lot more sense. Sorry, Sarah. So one more for Sarah then. This is the last poem in the book. It's called Love in a Drought Year. Sarah's from Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's in 2 parts. First part is called Sandias. The name for these mountains translates as watermelon, despite how they open over tan landscapes and cactus. Human bodies, whatever climate, are a certain percent water, except for you. You are a marvel, born here like a river sprung from rock, freshwater tumult which would fill other skins to bursting. Part 2, Desert Rose. When lightning throws its heavenly weight against the desert, the ground holds, but its sand skin blooms in roses. And with centuries of storms in this oven, the horizons hold an ocean of boulder fleck, rock seed, sun-packed dust swimming with punctuation marks shocked into blossom. And when your toes struck the faded farmland here, when your fingers thundered across my husk, alfalfa sprouted in rivers of daisies. Honey burst from corn stalks, acres flooded into flower, my voice burst into rain. I was going to read a few other new poems. I guess since Sarah is right now at this very moment probably putting our daughter to sleep, she goes to sleep fairly well right now, but that was not always the case. So this poem, this is for that. This poem is called When the Baby Falls Asleep, We Celebrate. Quietly, my wife comes back into the light, arms high, and I jump up, making sure not to creak the chair. We take off our shoes and we dance. We are good people, shipwrecked on the shores of this strange island, fearing the drums far, far through the trees. We tiptoe across the beach, TV quiet, as if all the world must whisper, must dare not wake her, must bow to this new pharaoh whose yokes we wear across our throats. This thunder infant with wrath grown as evening stretches into the fury and the fussiness that nursing at the breast can only sometimes abate. And if she then wakes, if the door creaks just so loud, if it's you who made the toilet seat crack like a gunshot only moments after she went down, and the woman who swore before Jesus to love you forever looks at you with all the flames of hell in her eyes, may God have mercy on you. My wife and I rent nothing but horror movies now. Huddle next to the television, trying not to guffaw out loud as these actors face aliens and disembowelments, things we might have feared in another life. But let's see Freddy or Jason or King freaking Kong make you fear like when you only meant to ease the door open, thinking how beautiful her little closed-eye dream face is, and instead see her sit up. Try not to scream. Her eyes rotate to snap on your mortal form. Oh, ha! Godzilla. Take a number, giant bug. This monster is so monstrous, we don't even try to run. And then read 3 more poems. These are a couple pretty new ones that I've just been kind of having fun with. They're poems about where not to read certain books. So this is called Where Not to Read Naked Lunch. In the Delhi train station, you will find the shabby copy of Burroughs' Naked Lunch and think, maybe I'll read this. 4 days later, you find yourself throwing up in the shared bathroom of a youth hostel where you have the room with no windows and scratchy TV. In delirium, you will pull it from your backpack. Perhaps you will even say out loud, I guess I have time now. You will find that this is a terrible idea. You can hardly walk, certainly not in a straight line. Your thoughts already have holes burned into them and smoking. The book is not written for you. It is there for people standing on level ground, not you tottering with open-eye nightmares come by naturally, already able to see monsters and lizards walking your hallways. You pay more rupees, move to a room with windows and BBC. When you depart, you place the book on a bench and walk away. And this is called Where Not to Read Red Dragon. Oh, you need to read this. Harris is amazing, you hear. And you pick it up in a used bookstore before finally going to Europe. You think, I'll be on trains a lot. I'd better bring something to read. Bring biographies, bring Keats, bring Coleridge, bring philosophy. Instead, you read a man holding his insanity off with both hands so he can save someone from the man who didn't work so hard at holding it off. This horror, not written down as slaughterhouse, its sounds are abattoir, and you can't put it down. As trains skate you over green countries, farms, cottages, pastoral poems probably just outside your small seat, castles and statues, rocks stacked in this and that century, history books unfolding in lush treasure maps, and you, locked in the dark of your skull, eyes startled at any splatter of light off stained glass, iron gate, blue lake. And this, I'm gonna get one last poem, and then we'll have some time for questions. And if you have any, if you're wondering about any, some of these poems and some others are at my website at midverse.com, and other generic crazy information. But one thing I'm working on right now is a book of poems about being a father, since it's been kind of an odd experience. I'm sure it's an odd experience for everyone, but I never thought I was going to have kids, so it's like, it's totally bizarre. And I end up with a lot of poems comparing my daughter to horror movies, mythological creatures, things like that. I do love her. She's fantastic. But you know, this is called Creation Stories. My favorite creation story right now is the Babylonian one, where Apsu and Tiamat, beautiful calm lovers, fill themselves with that new universe smell at everything's beginning. They sleep luxurious in a silken bed big as cornfields, basking as the sun rolls high into the heavens until they choose to maybe get up. And soon enough, of course, they have children. First Ed, then all his many brothers. It's at this point Apsu and Tiamat find themselves not so much wrapped in their ocean of pillows and duvets, their tides of comforters, billows of throes. No. Ed and all his many brothers are loud little fuckers. No sooner does Apsu drift off than Ed and What's-His-Face start screaming. No sooner does Tiamat weigh anchor on her crystal canoe than Ed and What's-His-Butt crack it to slivers with their boot stomps and shrieks. I should note that Apsu and Tiamat are not irrational parents. They are no doubt good people, perhaps delirious, sleep-deprived good people. And Apsu naturally decides to kill every last goddamn mongrel in the lot. That's what the great myths are about. Dreams about the restoration of paradise, something we've all known and lost hold of at some point. Apsu, of course, underestimates the squawking runts, doesn't see it coming until Ed's footy pajama footpad is crushing his throat into the woven flooring. Tiamat flown in terror and fury, but no match for Ed and all his many brothers and their hooligan friends they've come to make. They ripping her out of the stars to scatter like straw across the earth. My wife and I are expecting our second child. We are not the oceans and the freshwater seas. We are not the ancient gods. We are good people. Yet still, I admit, a little fearful. Thank you very much for coming.